Hi, my name is Adina Miller. I live in Greensboro. My family lives in New Jersey. I'm from kind of all over. And the book I want to read you is called Boodle, My Dog by Pia Lindenbaum. It's originally Swedish, I think. This is Boodle, my dog. She's sleeping in her favorite chair. My dad used to think it was his chair, but he knows better now. Boodle is a bull terrier. She's the best dog in the whole world. Her brilliant mind is always at work. Her guard is never down. Bull terriers are very fierce, strong, and brave. I bet a burglar would take one look at her and run for his life. It's my job to walk Boodle after school. It takes us a long time to get down the steps. My dad says that's because Boodle's a little nutty, but I say it's because she has to make sure there is no trouble waiting for us at the bottom of the stairs. That's the watchdog in her. It says, "Come on, Boodle." Here, I'm moving it. Is that okay? It's too hard. Boodle always seems to want to go in a different direction than I do. I let her decide because sometimes a dog knows best. It takes longer her way, I have to admit, but we always end up at the park just the same. This way, Boodle. In the park, other dogs chase balls, but not Boodle. She'd rather look at bugs and leaves. I wonder what she thinks about them. Isn't Boodle beautiful as she sits on the rock watching the other dogs fetch sticks? Nobody decides when she's going to play. She looks like a royal statue. Her paws are small and strong, and she has such pert ears. The fur on the tip of her nose is very short and soft. I'm so proud of her. Sometimes Boodle wanders off to explore by herself. Last week it took me 2 hours to find her in the tall grass. Nothing can stop her when she's on a scent trail, maybe of a burglar. When Boodle waits outside the grocery store, she likes to watch people and dogs passing her by. Other dogs seem to want to play with her, but she isn't interested. They're not her style. Little dogs bore her. But big dogs she loves. Sometimes I can't figure Boodle out. We don't like getting caught in the rain. Boodle is suspicious of puddles, and she's not fond of wet paws. It won't hurt you, Boodle. She'd rather avoid them if she can. You'd think Boodle would be glad to get back home where it's dry, but when I call her upstairs to towel her off, something outside usually catches her eye. I yell and yell, but she won't budge. She has nerves of steel. Boodle. Boodle won't eat just any time. She eats when she chooses. I always remind Mom to get Boodle's favorite foods, but sometimes she forgets. Usually, I can get her to eat anyway. Boodle has never really gotten used to the vacuum cleaner. It probably looks like a dangerous enemy to her. I bet only Boodle's amazing super dog self-control keeps her from ripping the vacuum to pieces. Every night I know it's coming. Nighttime is when Boodle gets frisky. I always rush through my bath so I don't miss the action. She's so cute when she wants to play. Mom asks why Boodle can't play outside during the day. I think maybe Boodle is just a night person. Some dogs are. My little brother hasn't learned to get out of Boodle's way yet. You'd think he would catch on after a while. I don't know why Mom gets so upset. He falls down all the time anyway. Like an amazing white cannonball, Boodle leaps across the room. What a dog! I'm always impressed when she clears the coffee table. Sometimes Boodle performs a happy little dance on the sofa. I yell for Dad to get the video camera, but he ignores me. Then the neighbors downstairs complain about the thumping noises. Boodle and I are surrounded by party poopers. Finally, Boodle has had enough. We're both ready for bedtime. Tonight, Boodle needs an extra little push to get her up into her chair. Oopsie daisy, Boodle. I feel happy when I see Boodle worm her way beneath her blankie. I give her a last pat and tell her good night. I'll sleep soundly tonight, knowing that Boodle is keeping me safe. It's me again, Adina Miller from Greensboro and wherever. And I thought you might like to hear a little bit of Dr. Seuss in Italian. You might know it as green eggs and ham, but this is what it sounds like when it's prosciutto e uova verdi by Dottore Seuss. In traduzione di Anna Sarfatti, which probably means she's Sephardi. Sono Nando, sono Nando, detto Ferdi. Quel tal Nando, detto Ferdi, non mi piace quel tal Ferdi. Vuoi prosciutto e uova verdi? Non li voglio, detto Ferdi, non mi piacciono prosciutto e uova verdi. Vuoi assaggiarli qua o là? Non li voglio qua né là, non li voglio e non mi va. No a prosciutto e uova verdi, non li voglio, detto Ferdi. Vuoi provarli al tavolino? Vuoi provarli col topino? Non li voglio a tavolino, non li voglio col topino, non li voglio qua né là, non li voglio e non mi va. No a prosciutto e uova verdi, non li voglio, detto Ferdi. Should I skip a little bit?
Okay.
Okay, I'll skip a little bit. Let's see. Get it out of here. We're getting going here. All right, vuoi provar con l'acquazzone? Non potrei con l'acquazzone neanche in treno o in galleria, non sull'auto, non sul ramo, basta Ferdi ora, vai via. No alla volpe, no al topino, no alla cassa e al tavolino, non li mangio qua né là, non li voglio, non mi va, ma non sai quel te ti perdi. Vuoi prosciutto e uova verdi? Non li voglio, detto Ferdi. Right, so he keeps saying no, right? Not on a boat. No, a prosciutto e uova verdi. Non li voglio, detto Ferdi. Ma una prova la puoi fare. You could just have a little taste. Ti potresti anche sbagliare. You could be wrong. Prova. 1, 2, 3. Un assaggio. Dai, per me. Just 1, 2, 3, a little taste. Just a little bit, for me. Nando. Se poi dopo mi dai pace, proverò, ma titubando, e vedrai che non mi piace. All right, if you'll just leave me in peace afterwards, I'll taste it. All right, and you'll see I don't like it. Che delizia, ha detto Ferdi. Il prosciutto e le uova verdi. Me li mangia, sì, in barchetta anche insieme alla capretta. How delicious. I do want it. I want to eat it with the goat. I want to eat it in a boat. E anche sotto l'acquazzone, e sul treno, e in galleria, e sul lato, e sul ramo. E che delizia, mamma mia. That's the best part in Italian. Me li mangio nella casa con la volpe rosa e bassa. Me li mangio a tavolino. Me li mangio col topino. Me li mangio qua e là. Dappertutto. Ora mi va. I want it everywhere. Vado matto per prosciutto e uova verdi. Grazie, detto Ferdi.
Hi, my name's David Fetter, and I live in Greensboro, North Carolina, but I'm really from California. And the book that I would love to read today is called The Shrinking of Treehorn. And it's by Florence Perry Hyde, and the illustrations are by Edward Gorey, who's one of my favorites. It starts right in. Something very strange was happening to Treehorn. The first thing he noticed was that he couldn't reach the shelf in his closet that he had always been able to reach before, the one where he hid his candy bars and bubble gum. Then he noticed that his clothes were getting too big. "My trousers are all stretching or something," said Treehorn to his mother. "I'm tripping on them all the time." "That's too bad, dear," said his mother, looking into the oven. "I do hope this cake isn't going to fall," she said. "And my sleeves come down way below my hands," said Treehorn, "so my shirts must be stretching too." "Think of that," said Treehorn's mother. "I just don't know why this cake isn't rising the way it should. Mrs. Abernail's cakes are always nice. They always rise." Treehorn started out of the kitchen. He tripped on his trousers, which indeed did seem to be getting longer and longer. At dinner that night, Treehorn's father said, "Do sit up, Treehorn. I can hardly see your head." "I am sitting up," said Treehorn. "This is as far up as I come. I think I must be shrinking or something." "I'm sorry my cake didn't turn out very well," said Treehorn's mother. "It's very nice, dear," said Treehorn's father politely. By this time, Treehorn could hardly see over the top of the table. "Sit up, dear," said Treehorn's mother. "I am sitting up," said Treehorn. "It's just that I'm shrinking." "What, dear?" asked his mother. "I'm shrinking, getting smaller," said Treehorn. "If you want to pretend you're shrinking, dear, that's all right," said Treehorn's mother, "as long as you don't do it at the table." "But I am shrinking," said Treehorn. "Don't argue with your mother, Treehorn," said Treehorn's father. "He does look a little smaller," said Treehorn's mother, looking at Treehorn. "Maybe he is shrinking." "Nobody shrinks," said Treehorn's father. "Well, I'm shrinking," said Treehorn. "Look at me." Treehorn's father looked at Treehorn. "Why, you're shrinking," said Treehorn's father. "Look, Emily, Treehorn is shrinking. He's much smaller than he used to be." "Oh dear," said Treehorn's mother. "First it was the cake, and now it's this. Everything happens at once." "I thought I was shrinking," said Treehorn, and he went into the den to turn on the TV. Treehorn liked to watch television. Now he lay on his stomach in front of the television set and watched one of his favorite programs. He had 56 favorite programs. During the commercials, Treehorn always listened to his mother and father talking together, unless they were having a boring conversation. If they were having a boring conversation, he listened to the commercials. Now, he listened to his mother and father. "He really is getting smaller," said Treehorn's mother. "What will we do? What will people say?" "Why, they'll say he's getting smaller," said Treehorn's father. He thought for a moment. "I wonder if he's doing it on purpose." "Why, they'll say he's getting smaller," said Treehorn's father. He thought for a moment. "I wonder if he's doing it on purpose, just to be different." "Why would he want to be different?" asked Treehorn's mother. Treehorn started listening to the commercials. The next morning, Treehorn was still smaller. His regular clothes were much too big to wear. He rummaged around in his closet until he found some of last year's clothes. They were much too big too, but he put them on and rolled up the pants and rolled up the sleeves and went down to breakfast. Treehorn liked cereal for breakfast, but mostly he liked cereal boxes. He always read every single thing on the cereal box while he was eating breakfast, and he always sent in for the things that the cereal box said he could send for. In a box in his closet, Treehorn saved all of the things he had sent in for from the cereal box tops. He had puzzles and special rings and flashlights and pictures of all the presidents and pictures of all the baseball players, and he had pictures of scenes suitable for framing, which he had never framed because he didn't like them very much. And he had all kinds of games and pens and models. Today on the cereal box was a very special offer of a very special whistle that only dogs could hear. Treehorn did not have a dog, but he thought it would be nice to have a whistle that dogs could hear, even if he couldn't hear it. Even if dogs couldn't hear it, it would be nice to have a whistle, just to have it. He decided to eat all of the cereal in the box so he could send in this morning for the whistle. His mother never let him send in for anything until he had eaten all of the cereal in the box. Treehorn filled in all the blank spaces for his name and address, and then he went to get his money out of the piggy bank on the kitchen counter. But he couldn't reach it. I certainly am getting smaller, thought Treehorn. He climbed up on a chair and got the piggy bank and shook out a dime. His mother was cleaning the refrigerator. You know how I hate to have you climb up onto the chairs, dear, she said. She went into the living room to dust. Treehorn put the piggy bank in the bottom kitchen drawer. That way I can get at it, no matter how little I get. He found an envelope and put a stamp on it and put the dime and the box top in so he could mail the letter on the way to school. The mailbox was right next to the bus stop. It was hard to walk to the bus stop because his shoes kept slipping off, but he got there in plenty of time, shuffling. He couldn't reach the mailbox slot to put the letter in, so he handed the letter to one of his friends, Moishe, and asked him to put it in. Moishe put it in. How come you can't mail it yourself, stupid? Asked Moishe. Because I'm shrinking, explained Treehorn. I'm shrinking, and I'm too little to reach the mailbox. That's a stupid thing to do, said Moishe. You're always doing stupid things, but that's the stupidest. I don't think Moishe's that good a friend. When Treehorn tried to get on the school bus, everyone was pushing and shoving. The bus driver said, all the way back in the bus, step all the way back. And then he saw Treehorn trying to climb onto the bus. Let that little kid on, said the bus driver. Treehorn was helped onto the bus. The bus driver said, you can sit right up here next to me if you want to, because you're so little. It's me, Treehorn, said Treehorn to his friend, the bus driver. The bus driver looked down at Treehorn. You do look like Treehorn at that, he said, only smaller. Treehorn isn't that little. I am Treehorn. I'm just getting smaller, said Treehorn. Nobody gets smaller, said the bus driver. You must be Treehorn's kid brother. What's your name? Treehorn, said Treehorn. First time I ever heard of a family naming two boys the same name, said the bus driver. Guess they couldn't think of any other name once they thought of Treehorn. Treehorn said nothing. When he got into class, his teacher said, nursery school is down at the end of the hall, honey. I'm Treehorn, said Treehorn. If you're Treehorn, why are you so small? Asked the teacher. Because I'm shrinking, said Treehorn. I'm getting smaller. Well, I'll let it go for today, said his teacher, but see that it's taken care of before tomorrow. We don't shrink in this class. After recess, Treehorn was thirsty, so he went down to the hall to the water bubbler. He couldn't reach it, and he tried to jump up high enough. He still couldn't get a drink, but he kept jumping up and down, trying. His teacher walked by. Why, Treehorn, she said, that isn't like you, jumping up and down in the hall. Just because you're shrinking, it does not mean you have special privileges. What if all of the children in the school started jumping up and down in the halls? I'm afraid you'll have to go see the principal. Treehorn. So Treehorn went to the principal's office. I'm supposed to see the principal, said Treehorn to the lady in the principal's outer office. It's a very busy day, said the lady. Please check here on this form the reason you have to see him. That will save time. Be sure to put your name down, too. That will save time. And write clearly. That will save time. Treehorn looked at the form. Check reason you have to see principal. That will save time. Talking in class, chewing gum in class, talking back to the teacher, unexcused absences, unexcused illness, unexcused behavior. There are many things to check, but Treehorn couldn't find one that said, being too small to reach the water bubbler. He finally wrote in, shrinking. When the lady said he could see the principal, Treehorn went into the principal's office with his form. The principal looked at the form, and then he looked at Treehorn. Then he looked at the form again. I can't read this, said the principal. It looks like shrinking. Shirking. Looks like shirking. You're not shirking, are you, Treehorn? We can't have any shirkers here, you know. We're a team, and we all have to do our very best. It says shrinking, said Treehorn. I'm shrinking. Shrinking, eh? Said the principal. Well, now I'm very sorry to hear that, Treehorn. You are right to come to me. That's what I'm here for, to guide. Not to punish, but to guide. To guide all the members of my team. To solve all their problems. But I don't have any problems, said Treehorn. I'm just shrinking. Well, I want you to know I'm right here when you need me, Treehorn, said the principal. And I'm glad I was here to help you. A team is only as good as its coach, eh? The principal stood up. Goodbye, Treehorn. If you have any more problems, come straight to me and I'll help you again. Problem isn't a problem once it's solved, right? By the end of the day, Treehorn was still smaller. At the dinner table that night, he sat on several cushions so he could be high enough to see over the top of the table. He's still shrinking, sniffed Treehorn's mother. Heaven knows I've tried to be a good mother. Maybe we should call a doctor, said Treehorn's father. I did, said Treehorn's mother. I called every doctor in the Yellow Pages, but no one knew anything about shrinking problems. She sniffed again. Maybe he'll just keep getting smaller and smaller until he disappears. No one disappears, said Treehorn's father positively. That's right, they don't, Treehorn's mother said more cheerfully. But no one shrinks either, she said after a moment. Finish your carrots, Treehorn. The next morning, Treehorn was so small, he had to jump out of bed. On the floor, under the bed, was a game he'd pushed under there and forgotten about. He walked under the bed to take a look at it. It was one of the games he'd sent in for from a cereal box. He had started playing it a couple of days ago, but he hadn't had a chance to finish it because his mother had called him to come right downstairs that minute and have his breakfast or he'd be late to school. Treehorn looked at the cover of the box. The big game for kids to grow on. It's tremendous, it's different, it's fun, it's easy, it's colossal. Play it with friends, play it alone. Complete with spinner, board, pieces, and complete instructions. The game was called The Big Game for Kids to Grow On. Treehorn sat under the bed to finish playing the game. He always liked to finish things, even if they were boring. Even if he was watching a boring program on TV, he always watched it right to the end. Games were the same way. He'd finished this one now. Where had he left off? He remembered he had just had to move his piece back 7 spaces on the board when his mother had called him. He was so small now that the only way he could move the spinner was by kicking it. So he kicked it. It stopped at number 4. That meant he could move his piece ahead 4 spaces on the board. The only way he could move the piece forward now was by carrying it, so he carried it. It was pretty heavy. He walked along the board to the 4th space. It said, "Congratulations," and up you go. Advance 13 spaces. Treehorn started to carry his piece forward the 13 spaces, but the piece seemed to be getting smaller. Or else he was getting bigger. That was it. He was getting bigger, because the bottom of the bed was getting close to his head. He pulled the game out from under his bed to finish playing it. He kept moving the piece forward, but he didn't have to carry it any longer. In fact, he seemed to be getting bigger and bigger with each space he landed in. Well, I don't want to get too big, thought Treehorn. So he moved the piece ahead slowly, from one space to the next, getting bigger with each space, until he was his own regular size again. Then he put the spinner and the pieces and the instructions on the board back in the box for the big game for kids to grow on, and put it in his closet. If he ever wanted to grow bigger or smaller, he could play it again, even if it was a pretty boring game. Treehorn went down to breakfast and started to read the new cereal box. It said you could send for 100 balloons. His mother was cleaning the living room. She came into the kitchen to get a dust rag. "Don't put your elbows on the table while you're eating, dear," she said. said Treehorn. I'm my own size now. My own regular size. That's nice, dear, said Treehorn's mother. It's a very nice size, I'm sure. And if I were you, I wouldn't shrink any more. Be sure to tell your father when he comes home tonight. He'll be so very pleased. She went back to the living room and started to dust and vacuum. That night, Treehorn was watching TV. As he reached over to change channels, he noticed that his hand was bright green. He looked in the mirror that was hanging over the television set. His face was green. His ears were green. His hair was green. He was green all over. Treehorn sighed. I don't think I'll tell anyone, he thought to himself. If I don't say anything, they won't notice. Treehorn's mother came in. Do turn the volume down, little dear, she said. Your father and I are having the Smedleys over to play bridge. Do comb your hair before they come, won't you, dear? Said his mother, as she walked back to the kitchen.
Christopher Robin and I walked alone under branches lit up by the moon, posing our questions to Owl and Eeyore as our days disappeared all too soon. But I've wandered much further today than I should, and I can't seem to find my way back to the wood. So help me if you can, I've gotta get back to the house at Pooh Corner by 1. You'd be surprised, there's so much to be done. Count all the bees in the hive, chase all the clouds from the sky. Back to the days of Christopher Robin and Pooh. Winnie the Pooh doesn't know what to do, got a honey jar stuck on his nose. He came to me asking help and advice, and from here no one knows where he goes. So I sent him to ask of the owl if he's there, and to loosen the jar from the nose of a bear. So help me if you can, I've gotta get back to the house at Pooh Corner by 1. You'd be surprised, there's so much to be done. Count all the bees in the hive, chase all the clouds from the sky. Back to the days of Christopher Robin, back to the ways of Pooh.
Hey Sam, I'm Nikki, I'm from Cincinnati, and I hope this story makes you laugh a little. Let's see, it is called Mighty Casey by James Preller. Alright. The outlook wasn't bright for the Del Mar dogs that day. All summer long, the dogs lost every game they played. Yes, it's true, the dogs had guts, and the dogs had heart, but catching the baseball, well, that was the hardest part. Still, the hounds took the field with bounding, bursting pride. Win or lose, they did their best. Well, they could always say we tried. For the loyal moms and dads, the games were not easily enjoyed. It was tough to watch their eager pups so mercilessly destroyed. On a team that was truly awful, one player stood out. Little Casey Jenkins was the worst by far, no doubt. It's unkind to speak ill of a batter who can't hit. So, gee, that Casey, he sure could chew and spit. Casey's every at-bat ended not with a bang, but a whiff. Yet Coach Lipinski noted, well, at least the breeze was stiff. One day, the game began poorly and went from bad to worst. The lowly dogs were quickly down, 5-0 in the first. Omar scraped a knee, grape juice spilled on Lipinski's shoe. Ronald the Runt had to pee and figured, hey, left field would do. Ashanti fell asleep. Tommy Maney climbed a tree. The team looked badly beat. Jamal got stung by a bee. Sally Sanchez tripped and fell. Johnny Reel refused to run. But Casey boldly proclaimed, "The game is not yet done." Bloopers, flubs, drops, and blunders, the dogs could do nothing right. Still, Casey declared, "We won't surrender without a fight." When Jin Lee clubbed a homer, the fans stood and cheered. The dogs scored at last. Said Lee, "That's like so weird." Larry Brisky, feeling frisky, took a pitch high and outside. He swung hard at the next one and gave that ball a ride. Hit by hit and base by base, the dogs rallied and sparked. "Strange, we might actually win," a stunned Coach Lipinski remarked. In the final frame, the dogs needed 3 runs to tie. Alas, O'Malley whiffed, and Reel hit a harmless pop fly. When Omar ripped a shot to the left, the stands almost exploded. Sanchez singled, and Bloomberg too. 2 outs, the bases were loaded. A fan yelled, "The bases are juiced!" "Who's on deck?" one wondered. "Oh no, it's Casey Jenkins," he groaned. Coach Lipinski blundered. Casey strode to the plate and gave his cleats a tap. He shut his eyes, swung with might, and laced a rope into the gap. Omar cruised home easily. Sanchez, she did the same. Bloomberg rounded third and scored. The dogs had tied the game. Casey's cleats kept chewing soil. The catcher stretched for the ball. Mighty Casey dove for home and awaited the umpire's call. Oh, somewhere in this favored land, a crowd is surely singing. A ball is flying somewhere, and bats are surely swinging. For the dogs, the day is done. The end has come, but not the same. Yes, shout it loud, cheer wildly. The dogs just won a game.
Hi, I'm Emily and I'm from Chapin, South Carolina. And I'm reading Baxter, the Pig Who Wanted to Be Kosher. One fine day, when Baxter was waiting for his bus, an old man sat down beside him and said, "Oh, I wish it were sundown right now." "Why is that?" asked Baxter. He was a curious sort of pig. "Because at sundown," said the old man, "the candles gleam and glow, and dance while our sweetest voices lift in song." "They do?" asked Baxter. He had never seen a candle dance. "Certainly," said the old man. "Tonight is the beginning of Shabbat, the day of rest, and so we make a special dinner. We light the candles, sing our thanks, and raise a glass surrounding by those we love best." "Wow," said Baxter. "That does sound like fun. That sounds terrific." "It is terrific," said the old man, and his bus pulled up, then he was gone. All week long, Baxter thought about the old man's words. The candles gleam and glow and dance while our sweetest voices lift in song. So the following Friday, Baxter hurried back to the bus stop, but the old man was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Baxter found a younger man wearing a long, white apron. After a while, Baxter cleared his throat. "I wonder, sir, do you know anything about Shabbat dinner?" "I should hope so," replied the man in the apron. "Oh, good," said Baxter. "Will you tell me how I can be part of it?" The man in the apron said, "You? A pig? Part of Shabbat dinner? That's impossible." "Why?" asked Baxter. "You're not kosher," said the man in the apron. "Kosher?" asked Baxter. "What's kosher?" But just then the bus arrived. That night, Baxter happened to be at the grocery store when he noticed a jar upon the top shelf. "Kosher," read the big block letters across the jar of pickles. Why, Baxter loved pickles. That week, Baxter ate pickles, and pickles, and pickles. Pickles sandwiches and pickle soup, pickles for breakfast and pickles in bed. On Friday, he arrived at the bus stop smelling of vinegar and lugging his jar. By this time, there was a woman in a large hat sitting on the bench. When Baxter sat down beside her, she wrinkled her nose and scooched away from him. "What's with the pickle juice?" she asked. "I found kosher," Baxter said proudly. "Mazel tov," said the woman in the large hat. "So what?" "So," he said, "do you think I'm kosher yet?" The woman in the large hat just laughed. "Pickles can dress up a sandwich or brighten a day. They're good, but they aren't that good." Sadly, Baxter set down his jar. The next day, Baxter returned to the grocery store. "Excuse me, sir," he said to the store manager. "Do you have anything kosher? The pickles were delicious, but I'm afraid they didn't do the trick." The manager pointed to Baxter toward the enormous pile of fresh bread. Baxter never tasted raisin challah before. 5 loaves later, and sick to his little round stomach, he moaned, "I must be kosher by now. Maybe even a little too kosher." Later that day, Baxter arrived at the bus stop and found the old man had returned. Shalom, said the old man. Hello, said Baxter. I'm glad you're here. I've learned so much all about pickles and challah. What do you think? Am I kosher yet? The old man looked puzzled. You want to be kosher? Baxter nodded. But, well, now I've heard it all, said the old man. But a pig is a pig, and a pig is... It's too bad. You aren't a cow. Cows are kosher. All week long, Baxter practiced mooing. He acquired a handy set of horns and cultivated a taste for clover. By Friday, he felt clearly certain he was nearly a bovine. By this time, when he got to the bus stop, nobody was there. He waited and waited, but nobody came. He mooed once, more for good measure. Finally dejected, he took off his horns and let out a deep sigh. But just then, he felt his hat on his shoulder. Looking up, Baxter found a woman with a big book standing above him. The woman said, "Hello, I'm Rabbi Rosen. Can I help you?" "Oh, I wish you could," blurted Baxter, "but I feel it's hopeless. A pig is a pig is a pig. I'll never be kosher." The rabbi gasped. "Why on earth would you want to be kosher?" "I want to be kosher," explained Baxter, "so that I can be part of Shabbat dinner. I engorged on pickles, I stuffed myself with challah, and I mooed and grazed and wore these silly horns for days, but nothing's working." "But," said the rabbi, "why would you want to get eaten?" "Eaten? Me?" Baxter looked up sharply. "Who said anything about getting eaten? I just want to see the candles gleam and glow and dance. I long to lift my sweetest voice in song. Isn't that what Shabbat dinner is all about?" The rabbi burst into laughter. "Yes, those things are important. It's true, my little pink friend. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. Although you're not kosher to eat, and never will be. Everyone is welcome at Shabbat dinner." Then Rabbi opened her book and rifled through it. "See," she said, "look here. It's a mitzvah to welcome a stranger. And you, my friend, are certainly strange. So I would be most grateful if you joined me for Shabbat dinner tonight." Baxter beamed. "Oh, thank you," he said. "Thank you very much." So at last, Baxter the pig watched the candles gleam and glow and dance. He raised his sweetest voice in song and had a marvelous time. Though it must be admitted, he made a rather mess of his kugel. Thank you. Feel better.
I'm Rachel from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I'm going to read you Walter the Farting Dog. Betty and Billy brought Walter home from the dog pound. "Nobody wanted him," said Billy. "But we love him," said Betty. "Well, he smells awful," said their mother. "I think you'd better give him a bath." Mother walked in and said, "He still smells awful," and that's when they got to the first clue, the telltale bubbles in the water. "He's probably just a little nervous," said Mother, hopefully. "His stomach must be upset." But Walter's stomach wasn't upset. Walter's stomach was fine. He felt perfectly normal. He just farted a lot. He did it when he bathed. He did it when he played with Betty and Billy. He did it when he walked around the house. He did it in the dining room. He did it in the kitchen. And he did it in his sleep. "That dog farts morning, noon, and night," said Father. "He can't help it, Daddy," said Betty and Billy. They didn't mind Walter's farts. "So what if he farts?" Billy said to Betty when they were alone in their room with Walter. Betty agreed. Walter agreed too. He sat there looking innocently around, farting. "Take him to the vet," said Father. "Farting," said the vet, "a rectal flatulence, as we say in the medical profession, and prescribed a change in diet." They gave Walter every kind of dog food he farted. They tried him on cat food. They gave him hot dogs, hamburgers, and lettuce and tomato sandwiches. They gave him fried chicken. They gave him rabbit food. They made him a vegetarian. No matter what that dog eats, he turns it into farts, roared Dad. Walter got the blame for everybody else's farts too. If Uncle Irv let one slip, he just went and stood near Walter. Then all he had to say was, "Walter!" and everyone would look at poor Walter. "He has to go back to the pound," said Father. "No, Daddy, please," begged Betty and Billy. "Don't send Walter away." "He goes tomorrow," said Father. They pleaded. Walter farted. It was all over. That night, Betty and Billy cried in their beds, and Walter looked at them unhappily. "Oh, Walter," said Betty, "you've got to stop farting, because Father's going to send you back to the pound tomorrow." Walter knew how serious the situation was. He'd never see Betty and Billy again. He resolved to hold in his farts forever. When Betty and Billy fell asleep, he walked down to the kitchen to see if there was anything around to eat. He managed to open the cupboard door with his nose and found the 25-pound bag of low-fart dog biscuits the vet had prescribed for him, which had made him fart more. Even though he knew they made him fart more, he couldn't resist. He ate the entire bag. "Very tasty," said Walter to himself. And then he went and lay down on the sofa. A gigantic gas bubble began to build inside of him. "This is going to be trouble," he said to himself, nervously. He was afraid of what might happen if he let it go. He thought maybe the house would explode, so he kept it in. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was torture. But he had resolved never to fart again. His future depended on it. As he lay there with his tail wrapped tightly between his legs, he heard a noise at the window. He watched it slowly open. A pair of burglars came through. They dropped silently into the kitchen. "Watch out for the dog," said one of the burglars. "He won't bite," said the other. "He's a wimp." Walter might have bitten them, except he was so filled with gas he couldn't move. They tied a rag around his snout so he couldn't bark. "Okay," whispered the first burglar. "Let's clear the place out." They took everything they could get their hands on. Walter wanted to stop them, but he was having unbearable gas pains. He rolled on his back and waved his paws in the air. He gnashed his teeth. "We've got it all," said the second burglar. "Let's go." That's when Walter let it fly. It was the worst part of his life. It made a tremendous noise and shot him across the room. A hideous cloud filled the air. The burglars clutched their throats, unable to breathe. With tears in their eyes, they raced for the window. They tried to grab their bag with all their valuables in it, but their arms were too weak. "Let's get out of here." They jumped out of the window and ran up the block, choking and gasping for air. Still blinded by Walter's attack, they stepped into the headlights of an approaching police car. "Hold it right there," said the policeman. When Father and Mother came down in the morning, they found the open window and they saw the bag with their valuables in it, and Walter was sitting beside it. He still had the rag tied around his snout. Got to say he looked heroic. "He saved the silverware," cried Mother. "He saved the VCR," cried Father. "Good dog, Walter. You're our dog, even if you do fart all the time." And so the family learned to live with Walter, the hero dog. And that's the end of our tale. The end.
Hi, I'm Jessica, and I'm from Colorado. I'm going to read you a poem called Sick. "I cannot go to school today," said little Peggy Ann McKay. "I had the measles and the mumps, a gash, a rash, and purple bumps. My mouth is wet, my throat is dry. I'm going blind in my right eye. My tonsils are as big as rocks. I've counted 16 chicken pox, and there's one more, that's 17. And don't you think my face looks green? My leg is cut, my eyes are blue. It might be instamatic flu. A cough, a sneeze, a gasp, a choke. I'm sure that my left leg is broke. My hip hurts when I move my chin. My belly button's caving in. My back is wrenched. My ankle sprained. My appendix rains each time it rains. My nose is cold. My toes are numb. I have a sliver in my thumb. My neck is stiff. My voice is weak. I hardly whisper when I speak. My tongue is filling up my mouth. I think my hair is falling out. My elbows bent. My spine ain't straight. My temperature is 108. My brain is shrunk. I cannot hear. There is a hole inside my ear. I have a hangnail. My heart is... What? What's that you say? What's that you say? You say today is Saturday? Goodbye. I'm going out to play. This poem is called Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout Would Not Take the Garbage Out. Sarah Sylvia Cynthia Stout would not take the garbage out. She'd scour the pot, she'd scrape the pans, candy the yams and spice the hams. And though her daddy would scream and shout, she simply would not take the garbage out. And so it piled up to the ceilings, coffee grounds, potato peelings, brown bananas, rotten peas,
chunks of sour cottage cheese. It filled the can, it covered the floor, it cracked the window, it blocked the door. With bacon rinds and chicken bones, drippy ends of ice cream cones, prune pits, peach pits, orange peels, gloppy glumps of cold oatmeal, pizza crust and withered greens, soggy beans and tangerines, crust of black burnt butter toast, crispy bits of beefy roast. The garbage rolled on down the hall. It raised the roof. It broke the wall. Greasy napkins, cookie crumbs, globs of gooey bubble gum, cellophane from green bologna, rubber blueberry macaroni, peanut butter caked and dry, curdled milk and crust of pie, moldy melons, dried up mustard, eggshells mixed with lemon custard, cold French fries and rancid meat, yellow lumps of cream of wheat. At last, the garbage reached so high that finally it touched the sky. And all the neighbors moved away, and none of her friends would come to play. And finally Sarah Cynthia Stout said, "Okay, I'll take the garbage out." But then, of course, it was too late. The garbage reached across the state, from New York to the Golden Gate, and there in the garbage she did hate. Poor Sarah met an awful fate that I can right now relate, because the hour is much too late. But children, remember Sarah Cynthia Stout, and always take the garbage out. This story is called The Unicorn. A long time ago, when the earth was green, and there was more kinds of animals than you've ever seen, and they'd run around free while the world was being born, the loveliest of all was the unicorn. There was a green alligators and long-necked geese. There was humpy bumpy camels and chimpanzees. There were castratorasidelphants, but I'm sure as you're born, the loveliest of all was the unicorn. But the Lord, seeing some sin and it caused him pain, he said, "Stand back, I'm gonna make it rain." He said, "Hey, brother Noah, I'll tell you what you do. Go build me a floating zoo. And you take the 2 alligators and a couple of geese, 2 humpy bumpy camels, and 2 chimpanzees. Take 2 casaratadasa-sandal elephants, but sure as you're born, Noah, don't forget my unicorn." Now Noah was there, and he was answered the calling, and he finished up the ark just as the rain started falling. He marched the animals 2 by 2, and he called out as they went through, "Hey Lord, I got your 2 alligators, your couple of geese, your humpy bumpy camels, and your 2 chimpanzees. Got your casaranadasa-sandal elephants, but Lord, I'm so forlorn, because I don't see no unicorn." Old Noah looked through the driven rain, but the unicorn were hidden playing silly games. They were kicking and splashing in the misty morn. Oh, them silly unicorn. Then the goat started goatin', and the snake started snaking, and the elephant started elephanting, and the boat started shaking. The mouses started squeaking, and the lion started roaring, and everybody aboard but the unicorn. I mean, the green alligators and the long-necked geese, the humpy bumpy camels and the chimpanzees. Noah cried, "Close the door, 'cause the rain is pouring, and we just can't wait for them unicorn." The ark started moving, and it drifted with the tide, and the unicorn looked up from the rock and cried. And when the water come up, the sort of floated them away. That's when that's why you've never seen a unicorn to this day. You'll see a lot of alligators and a whole mess of geese. You'll see a humpy bumpy camels and a lots of chimpanzees. You'll see a castrated elephants, but sure as you're born, you're never going to see no unicorn. This poem is Double-Tailed Dog. Would you like to buy a dog with a tail at either end? He is quite the strangest dog there is in town, though he is not too good at knowing just exactly where he's going. He is very, very good at sitting down. He doesn't have a place to put a collar, and I'll admit it's rather hard to lead him, but he cannot hear you call, for he has no ears at all. But it doesn't cost a single cent to feed him. He cannot bite, he'll never bark or growl, just scratch him on his tails, he'll find it pleasing.
but you'll have to take him out for twice as many walks, and I'll bet you can quickly guess the reason.
Where the sidewalk ends. There is a place where the sidewalk ends and before the street begins. And there the grass grows soft and white, and there the sun burns crimson bright. And there the moonbird rests his flight to cool in the peppermint wind. Let us leave this place where the smoke blows black and the dark street winds and bends. Past the pits where the asphalt flowers grow, we shall walk with a walk that is measured and slow. And watch where the chalk white arrows go to the place where the sidewalk ends. Yes, we'll walk with a walk that is measured and slow, and we'll go where the chalk white arrows go. For children they mark, and the children they know, the place where the sidewalk ends. Last poem, Hector the Collector. Hector the Collector collected bits of string, collected dolls and broken heads, and rusty bells that would not ring, pieces out of picture puzzles, bent up nails and ice cream sticks, twists of wire, worn out tires, paper bags and broken bricks. Old chipped vases, half shoelaces, Gatling guns that would not shoot, leaky boats that would not float, and stopped up horns that would not toot, butter knives that had no handles, copper keys that fit no locks, rings that were too small for fingers, dried up leaves and patched up socks, worn out belts that had no buckles, electric trains that had no tracks, airplane models, broken bottles, three-legged chairs, and cups with cracks. Hector the Collector loved these things with all his soul, loved them more than shining diamonds, loved them more than glistening gold. Hector called to all the people, "Come and share my treasure trunk." And all the silly, sightless people came and looked and called it junk.
Hi, I'm Abby Smallman, and I'm from Charlotte, and I'm going to be reading The Man Who Walked Between the Towers by Mordecai Gerstein. Once there were two towers side by side. They were each a quarter of a mile high, 1,340 feet, the tallest buildings in New York City. A young man saw them rise into the sky. He was a street performer. He rode a unicycle. He juggled balls and fiery torches. But most of all, he loved to walk and dance on a rope he tied between two trees. He looked not at the towers, but at the space between them, and thought, what a wonderful place to stretch a rope, a wire on which to walk. Once the idea came to him, he knew he had to do it. If he saw three balls, he had to juggle. If he saw two towers, he had to walk. That's how he was. Hadn't he danced on a wire between the steeples of Notre Dame Cathedral above his amazed home city, Paris? Why not here, between these towers? Of course he knew that, as in Paris, the police and the owners of the towers would never allow it. You must be crazy, they would say. You'd fall for sure. And so Philippe, that was the young man's name, began a plan to do it secretly. The buildings are not quite finished, he thought. Maybe if I dressed as a construction worker... Early on an August evening, he and a friend entered the South Tower. They got a 440-pound reel of cable and other equipment into the elevator, took it to the unfinished top 10 floors, and waited till nightfall when everyone had gone. Then they carried everything up 180 stairs to the roof. At midnight, on the other tower's roof, two more friends tied a thin, strong line to an arrow and shot it across to Philippe, 140 feet away. It missed and landed on a ledge 15 feet below the roof. Bad luck, thought Philippe. He crawled down to the ledge over the sparkling city and got the arrow. To its line he tied a stronger line, which his friends pulled back to their tower. To his end of the stronger line, Philippe tied the cable on which he would walk. It was 7/8 of an inch thick. His friends pulled the cable over to their tower, but it was so heavy that it slipped from Philippe's grip. The cable's middle plummeted toward the street, pulling his friends on the other tower to the very edge. Philippe, just in time, secured his end. It took 3 hours to pull the cable back up. Frantically, as the stars faded, they tightened it between the towers. It was past dawn before they were ready. Philippe put on his black shirt and tights. He picked up his 28-foot balancing pole. All his life he had worked to be here, to do this. As the rising sun lit up the towers, out he stepped onto the wire. Out to the very middle he walked, as he were walking on the air itself. Many winds whirled up from between the towers, and he swayed with them. He could feel the towers breathing. He was not afraid. He felt alone and happy and absolutely free. A woman coming from the subway might have been the first to see him. Look, someone walking on a wire between the towers. Everyone stopped and looked up. They gasped and stared. It was astonishing. It was terrifying and beautiful. A quarter of a mile up in the sky, someone was dancing. Police saw it too. Officers rushed to the roofs of the towers. "You're under arrest," they shouted through bullhorns. Philippe turned and walked the other way. Who would come and get him? For almost an hour, back and forth, he walked, danced, ran, and knelt in salute upon the wire. He even lay down to rest. The city and arbor spread beneath him. The sky surrounded him. Seagulls flew under and over. As long as he stayed on the wire, he was free. When he felt completely satisfied, he walked back to the roof and held out his wrists for the handcuffs. They brought him to court. The judge sentenced him to perform in the park for the children of the city. This he did happily, though during his performance some boys playing on the wire jerked it and Philippe fell, but caught himself. Now the towers are gone. But in memory, as if imprinted on the sky, the towers are still there. And part of that memory is the joyful morning, August 7th, 1974, when Philippe Petit walked between them in the air.
Hi Sam.
Hi Sam.
My name is Jordan and I'm from Israel.
My name is Barry and I'm not from Israel.
And now we're gonna read you this book, ארץ יצורי הפרא.
Woohoo!
בלילה בו לבש מקס את חליפת הזאב שלו והשתולל ועשה צרות ממין אחד וממין אחר. קרא לו אמא שלו, יצור פרא, ומקס אמר, אני אוכל אותך! ואז היא שלחה אותו לישון, בלי שום ארוחת ערב. בלילה ההוא התחיל פתאום יער לצמוח בחדר של מקס. והוא גדל. וגדל, עד שהתקרה נעלמה מאחורי שיחים מטפסים. וכל הקירות מסביב היו לעולם הגדול שבחוץ. וים גדול התגלגל ובא עם סירת מפרש פרטית בשביל מקס, והוא הפליג בה למרחקים ושט דרך לילה ויום. אל תוך שבועות וחודשים, ועל פני שנה ויותר, אל ארץ יצורי הפרא. וכשבא אל ארץ יצורי הפרא, הם שאגו את השאגות הנוראות שלהם, וחרקו בשיניים הנוראות שלהם, וגלגלו את עיניהם הנוראות, ושלפו את ציפורניהם הנוראות. עד שמקס קרא שקט, והכניע אותם בתכסיס קסמים. הוא הביט ישר לתוך העיניים הצהובות שלהם, בלי למצמץ אפילו. פעם אחת, והם נבהלו נורא, וקראו לו יצור הפרא, הכי פרא. והכתירו אותו למלך יצורי הפרא. ועכשיו, קרא מקס, כולם מתחילים להשתולל. עכשיו מספיק, אמר מקס, ושלח את כל יצורי הפרא לישון, בלי ארוחת ערב. ומקס, מלך יצורי הפרא, נשאר בודד וגלמוד, ורצה נורא להיות במקום שבו יש מישהו שאוהב אותו יותר מכל. פתאום הגיעו אליו ממרחקים, אולי מסוף העולם, ריחות נפלאים של מאכלים טעימים, ואז החליט שדי, הוא לא רוצה יותר להיות מלך בארץ יצורי הפרא. אבל יצורי הפרא יללו, אוי, בבקשה, אל תלך, מתחשק לנו לאכול אותך, כל כך אנחנו אוהבים אותך. ומקס אמר, לא. יצורי הפרא שאגו את השאגות הנוראות שלהם, וחרקו בשיניים הנוראות שלהם, וגלגלו את עיניהם הנוראות, ושלפו את ציפורניהם הנוראות, אבל מקס עלה על סירת המפרש הפרטית שלו, ונפנף להם לשלום. והפליג על פני שנה ויותר, לאורך שבועות וחודשים, ודרך יום בהיר. ישר לתוך הלילה של החדר הפרטי שלו, שם מצא את ארוחת הערב שלו, מחכה לו. והיא הייתה עוד חמה.
The end.
וואו!